Okay, excuse me. Hello, everyone. This is video lecture number 2 in our 8-week course here on sports marketing and communications. We are going to cover collegiate sport today. We're going to talk about marketing inside collegiate sports as well as management and other issues. I'm going to review a little history and sort of talk about kind of how collegiate sports is broken out in terms of governance. At the end, I want to give some information about some changes and some upcoming course material and the schedule. As always, you can go to the Blackboard and look at your syllabus and schedule that are posted there. And of course, all your assignments will be in the module folders. Apologize for those being delayed, being opened. Thought I had the dates right and didn't. So those of you who reached out to me to tell me that they were not available, I do appreciate that. Again, apologize for that. Everybody should have access to all the material at this point. So again, don't forget to check your emails and check your Blackboard to see if there's anything that's been posted, and make sure you stay on top of things. Okay, without further ado, again, you can always email me, text me if you have any questions. Some of you already done that, and it's perfectly fine, and I do appreciate that's the easiest way to reach me. With that, I'm going to share my screen and pull up the slides. Okay. Go here, and we will go here, and we will do the slideshow. Okay, we are going to talk about collegiate sport. Obviously, it is a huge segment of the sports industry, primarily in North America and even primarily in the United States. There's obviously collegiate or scholastic sports in other parts of the world, but for our purposes today, we're going to focus on how it is done here in the United States. Of course, there were almost half a billion. Sorry, I'm going to get this right. Almost 500,000 student athletes in the United States at all different levels. It continues to grow and is obviously very popular. There are many reasons for that. This is not necessarily a management class, but of course, young people, including I'm sure many on here, grew up playing sports as I did through my school and competitively, some playing clubs and things like that. But for the most part, we're talking about student athletes that are in colleges and universities. Of course, there's more programming every single year. All kinds of sports gives us as sports fans and consumers lots and lots of choices. Of course, as we talk about in this class, as you guys remember, a marketer's number one job is to create demand. It's very hard to do that in the current landscape of our splintered audiences and all different devices. Everybody competing for attention. They want our eyes and our ears eventually to capture our hearts and our minds. That's the idea, right? But with the number of broadcasting events every year, it gives us choices, which is good, but also makes it much tougher for marketers to reach their goals. Corporate sponsorships, partnerships continue to be steady and healthy despite the ever-increasing cost of things. It doesn't seem to be an industry or a segment that's slowing down. Broadcast contracts rights, broadcast entities, networks, streaming services continue to pay more and more for the rights to put those programs on their air. Of course, just a little review here, you remember, right? So if a network, a TV station, a streaming service wants to put a football game or a basketball game or a volleyball game on TV, they have to pay for the rights to put that programming on that, right? Because there's a certain audience out there they're trying to deliver or trying to reach. So once that audience is reached, then that network can sell advertising to advertisers trying to reach the same audience, right? So we know in college football is is the most popular sport, followed by probably men's basketball and a few others in there. And some of it's regionally driven. But again, if you want to put college sports on your network, your station, your streaming service, you've got to pay for the rights to do that. That money goes into the conferences, and typically that's distributed amongst the member universities of the conferences. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Lots more student athletes coming from overseas and international students coming in to play sports here, which is good. It's a great cultural mix, as well as they provide a lot of talent. Some of my classes I teach at the University of Tulsa, I have several international students in those classes. Merchandise that's licensed out. Another way that universities generate revenue is through licensing their intellectual property, their logos, their marks, their names. That is all owned by universities and conferences, and you can't just produce stuff without paying for a license to do that. And that money that's paid for that license is called a royalty. Those royalty dollars obviously also flow to the revenue bottom lines of schools and conferences. And some current issues that we're going to talk about are conference realignment and expansion. And there's obviously an emergence of conference networks that, again, provide some of that splintered programming I was mentioning before. Excuse me, a little bit of the history of collegiate athletics. May be surprised to know that the authors of this particular book that I use in the slides here point to 1852 in a crew race, a rowing race between Harvard and Yale, as the first sort of commercial intercollegiate athletic event in the United States. And it was sponsored by a railroad company. So what's important about that, of course, is that we're used to corporate sponsorships, around big events, collegiate events in 2024 and the modern era. But what the authors tell us here and what the slides tells us is that commercialization and sponsorship has really been part of the first sort of organized big collegiate athletic event as clear back as 1852. Excuse me, for those of us that are history buffs, we'll know that that is pre-Civil War. If you don't know when the Civil War is, please find out when the Civil War was, but this is pre-Civil War, which is really, really early on. The events that took place back then were run by the students. There was no such thing as athletic directors or athletic departments. But even then, there was popularity, causing pressure to win. They realized they needed to get organized and bring in coaches and get some different help. And as it says here, 1864, Yale hired the first professional coach, which, by the way, was during the Civil War years. The first Intercollegiate Football Association was the first form of governing association, and it was student developed in 1876. So look how far back college football was getting organized. However, the game back then looked a lot different than it does now. It's still a collision sport. Football today is still a very violent sport. Of course, we know young men and women get hurt all the time, mostly men that play the sport. But it was far more dangerous back then just because equipment was different, protection was different. And so there was lots of concern. There were several deaths around it. And so they were basically trying to get organized to figure out who could play, what the eligibility rules were, how do we respond to severe injuries and make football a safer game to play, like as early as 1905. And another governing body, what we know as the NCAA, was officially formed in 1912. So it's been around for a long, long time. In 29, there was a report that painted a bleak picture of intercollegiate athletics. Now look at this, 1929, the year of the stock market crash, another historical event. But look at this, identifying many academic and recruiting abuses, payments to student athletes, and commercialization of athletes and athletics. All things that we talk about in 2024, still relevant. We still grapple with them. The NCAA and the governments of the states and federal government still try to figure out a way to regulate college athletics. And what is the point of all that, right? Ideally, is to keep things fair, to keep things legal. But they were concerned about it as clear back as 1929. And so the NCAA was pressured to change into an organization that would oversee standards uh, for who student athletes were and to monitor recruiting activities of coaches and administrators and establish principles governing amateurism. What constitutes what an amateur is, what rules do we put in place and how you recruit them. Again, this is a marketing class. So think about how athletes are communicated with, how they are recruited, which is a form of marketing, of course, which we'll get into a little bit later. It's been in existence and it's been a challenge for those of us that have worked in college athletics and those that still do for a long, long time. And yes, things have gotten better to some degree. They've, of course, evolved and changed over time. But it's a constant process to make sure that it's regulated for all kinds of things: rules, regulations, safety, compliance, fairness. Those are all things that the NCAA works on every single year to try to get right. Part of the question in those reports was what was the integrity of higher education being threatened by college athletics? Again, a very relevant question. One of the criticisms that is at least in the popular sports, maybe a lot of student athletes aren't going to school for academic reasons. If they're there to play sport, ideally try to parlay their talents into being a professional because the stakes are so high. Can't blame those athletes to do that. They have hopes and dreams and they have the right to go for them. But again, the question was then, and it is now, where's the integrity of higher education? There's a lot of states that are, excuse me, there are a lot of schools that are state-run schools, and the highest, in other words, they get support from state government funds, right, which are tax dollars and federal dollars. And in those states, a lot of times the head football or basketball coach is the highest paid person on the government payroll. And so a lot of people would say that is not in line. That's out of whack. Why aren't we paying professors, as an example, or college presidents as much as we pay college football and basketball coaches? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's for you to think about and debate about, perhaps write about in some of your papers. But the question is there: where's the academic integrity? Are student athletes just that, or are they just athletes? What's important? And of course, it varies school to school, conference to conference, and of course, athlete to athlete. I don't want to paint too broad of a brush on athletes, saying that they're not there to get an education. I would say 99% of students that go to school take that seriously and are there for those reasons, out of their own personal integrity and their future career and things they want to do. So look at this: 1989, 78% of Americans thought collegiate athletics were out of hand. We see that today with NIL, which we'll get into here in a little bit. And in 1989, that same year, the Knight Commission was formed that prompted the NCAA membership to pass numerous rules and regulations regarding recruiting activities, academic standards, and financial practices, right? So again, more of those kinds of things that have happened over the evolution of the NCAA to, again, ideally make things fair, right? Fair in all areas, competition on the fields of play, as well as recruiting, again, which is marketing, because it's all about dollars, right? And how we make those connections to dollars, we'll talk about as we go here. And it's a theme of this entire course. Continuous concerns, costs, right? We'll talk about this, of course. This no different, right? It's been going on for a long, long time. There is no end in sight for the cost that it takes athletic departments and universities to field athletic teams, from again, the cost of money for travel, for recruiting, plus facilities, coaches, trainers, travel, all kinds of things. It's just very, very expensive. There are, of course, academic abuses and fraud that happens in every industry. But of course, when big money and big stakes are involved, it tends to sometimes attract nefarious individuals that or get those individuals that get caught up in it. Again, we talk about commercialization, exploitation of student athletes. That's gotten better with NIL. Again, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And of course, there's a huge financial gap. NCAA division, the haves and the have-nots. We talk about, at least when it comes to football and the major sports, the Power Five conferences, and everybody wants to be in a Power Five conference. My alma mater, Oklahoma, moving into the SEC. I personally think that's a bad move, but they're doing it. And why? It's typically for money and prestige and ego and all those kinds of things. But I want you to understand that the Power Five is not a real thing. It's a made up thing. It's a media construct. It's a marketing construct. Here we are in marketing class. It's for those that have the broadcast rights and pay millions and billions of dollars to do it. They're trying to make that separation because, again, they're trying to make it more interesting to you. So those schools that play NCAA Division I FBS football, but aren't in a quote unquote Power Five school, they all play in the same division. It's patently unfair, right? Those that play in the Summit League or even the All-American Conference, they all play Division I football, FBS football, but we separate. We have the Power Five, and we have the other six or whatever it's called. I can't remember right now. And that is a division that's just a construct of media and marketing. That is not a real thing. The NCAA did not create anything called Power Five conferences, but there's definitely a gap growing between the haves and have-nots. And that's all based on competition. Competition for what? Money, of course, but money comes from competition of support from fans, competition for talent across the board. And that all is directly related to marketing, right? Again, creating that demand, creating interest to get more support. And with that support, more revenue follows. And that's why it's very, very competitive, right? Ideally, what you do with that revenue, what you do with the money is what? Improve things, pay people more money, improve your facilities, do all the things that you hope to do. You can't do without money. We all know that. Doesn't matter whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit organization, you got to have revenue to make things happen. And this is where it gets really, really competitive. Women in college athletics, of course, are on the rise. Women are getting more and more interest from fans and sponsorships. Great player at the University of Iowa this year, did great things, basketball player, and bring a lot of eyes and ears and marketing dollars into spotlight on the sport of women's basketball. There's a related assignment for those of you in the 5213 class, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But after Title IX was put in place, the law in 1971 that basically tied federal support dollars to universities by evening the playing field for women, giving them opportunities to compete in college athletics across the board. And since then, there's just been a really, really boom over the last 40 years, 50 years to make sure that women have a fair shot. And it's growing all the time and becoming more popular. I worked for a WNBA team, and a lot of those athletes that played professionally for that team, of course, played collegiately, and obviously wonderful athletes. But again, women's sport has to compete on the same playing field theoretically as every other sport, men's sport, other women's sports. And again, they're just part of the mix now. It's the way it should be, but it's also very competitive. We think about college soccer athletes or the most popular type of women's athletes typically tend to be individuals. But in terms of team sports, basketball's growing, women's professional soccer and other sports are growing as well. And that is a result of Title IX and the outcrop of that, and people respecting it more and paying attention to it more, as they should. The NCAA and NAIA and NJCAA are just different sort of groupings of colleges. You can read about them right there. They're governing bodies. Typically, it has to do with the size of the school or how many years and what kind of degree programs are on the table. So you can look at the membership there. The National Junior College Athletic Association is really for two-year colleges. But you can count the numbers there and do the math on how many athletes there are. But these are all different governing bodies for the different sort of levels of collegiate athletics in the states. NCAA is a voluntary association. If you're a school or you're a conference, you don't have to be a member of the NCAA. There's advantages to it, for most people are, but I want you to understand that it's a voluntary organization. The goal is to maintain athletics as part of an education program. The question, of course, harkening back to a couple slides before and even now, is which one is which. I've always used the analogy, and coaches' views, not mine, but I've borrowed it, that athletics is like the front porch to university. It allows people in, they come through. Students, again, athletics themselves are a marketing mouth, a marketing voice, a marketing tool for a lot of these universities, and it cannot be denied, whether people like that or not, certain academics, people at the schools like that or not. That is just the way that it is. And so, I know lots of people that pick particular schools because they wanted the full college experience. And part of that is going to a school that maybe had a fantastic athletic program. And NSU itself has a wonderful athletic program, but it's at a different level. I don't know how much of that actually influences students like yourselves to go there or not. Probably not very much, but it's still something that it can be used. That if you thought about going to a school that didn't have an athletic department at all, or had no college athletics and wasn't part of the full range of experience, it would make a difference. It's diminished. Plus the fact, again, as part of the education part of a student athlete, physical education and the sport of education, and things that students learn while they're playing a sport and for a team are tools and trades that help them in the business world or once they get out and onto a career. So it's, again, supposed to fit along with one's education, ideally. Three-division system created to increase flexibility in addressing member needs, right, based on different things. Anyway. Obviously, we get together, we talk about rules, regulations, best practices, things we're going to change. This is how sort of the governing bodies are set up. Sorry, that's my son. Division I supports the philosophy of competitiveness, generating revenue through athletics. 1 second, please. FBS are institutions that somewhat are larger football playing schools that must maintain certain attendance requirements. Think about that. If you want to stay in FBS, I think it was over the course of when they look at it, you can check me on this. I think I want to say it's like 15,000 average football fans. I think you have to, or you could be in jeopardy of losing your FBS status. FCS is for institutions that play football, but they don't have the attendance requirement. And there are approximately 100 Division I members that do not even sponsor football. A lot of Division I schools, we see that now at basketball time. Schools that are in the Division I men's and women's basketball tournaments that just don't even sponsor football. Why? It's expensive. It's hard to find athletes. But fielding a basketball team, volleyball team, soccer team, it's not as much behind it. So you can have a really nice, robust athletic department, but you don't necessarily need to have football to do it. The Division II awards athletic scholarships, but on a modest basis, and then Division III doesn't even allow athletic scholarships. So you may think of some sort of more pure form of the college athletic experience, where student athletes that play at the division level there do so for the love of the game. Not that the people that play at the Division I level don't have the love of the game as well, but it's a different set of circumstances. Obviously, there could be some talent issues, right? There are some people that are more talented than others, and maybe those that play Division III just never had an opportunity to showcase their talents at a higher level, or maybe it's just a personal choice. They like the school, they like the academics, and while they were there, they wanted to play sport. I think they still get recruited; they just don't get athletic scholarships to play at the Division III level. More about the governance structure. Conferences must have a minimum of 7 institutions in a division to be recognized as a voting member conference. Of course, they have their own compliance directors and run seminars regarding rules and regulations. Compliance, of course, departments at universities are huge. They're professionals that do nothing but make sure their institutions are compliant with all rules and regulations. Their student athletes are compliant. You can get in trouble, fines, and different kinds of punishments, as it were, for breaking rules. They may also provide revenue sharing program to member institutions. Most of them do. Example authors give us here is that the Big Ten, through their athletic department, and most of this money comes from broadcast rights agreements, are able to give each one of their schools 25 million share per team, per institution. Obviously, with conference realignment, I just mentioned that it's almost getting hard to keep track of. But why? Everybody's trying to get into these haves and have-not institutions, right? It's this line of demarcation between you're either in this or you're out. It's becoming this class system. My personal feeling is, I'm not a real fan of it. I'm old and old school, but I understand why institutions do it. I understand sort of the motivations behind it. I just don't know if it's a good thing. I know that it has affected my viewership interest. I'm just not as into it anymore as I used to be. You guys, I would assume, are a lot younger than me, and so maybe you love it, but it is continuing to shake out as people grapple to find a place where they feel they fit in, where they feel their institutions and their student athletes can compete on a national level, and they can compete for those dollars. All right. They compete for the dollars again through eyes and ears, through viewership, through support, marketing to get those people to support your school through university. And they're trying to figure out the best place to do that. And so that's why all this stuff is moving around. It's been very unstable. Hopefully it'll settle in, but it's been moving around a lot. Just a second.
But
Sorry about that. So again, it will continue to be an issue as again people try to find a place that they feel fits them for everything they want to do. And again, ultimately, it comes down to marketing to recruit, support, which ties the revenue into the universities. And here's where we go to the marketing communication slides, right? Competition, of course, is there for student athletes and fans. And that competition means that you have to figure out, same like you would anything else, what your product is. Your product is your school, your brand, the sport itself, right? So you have to figure out ways to reach people so that you get support. And so student athletes are looking for a best place for them to go. A lot of that is tied into potential revenue generation for themselves, income generation for themselves with NIL, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But also those institutions are competing for fans, right? We need fans in the stands. We need fans watching on television and all our devices. And that competition means that marketers, those that market and try to grow those audiences, find it ever more difficult to attract attention and keep that attention because as we know, again, audience size at the bottom there directly relates to revenue generation. This is a big takeaway for this class. If you guys don't know that, it seems obvious, but again, that's why everybody's looking to like and share and subscribe. It's no different. We need support, and support is brings along dollars from calls to action to get you to do something, buy a ticket, make a donation, come to a game, watch something on television, right? Competition for sponsorship and donor dollars, man, it's getting thin, even though I've said it's healthy and it continues to grow. At some point there may be a bubble that's going to burst. Sponsors only have so many dollars, donors only have so many dollars. All institutions to some degree or another are worthy of those dollars. But there's a piece of a pie, and those slices are getting smaller and smaller. And therefore, again, you have to stay popular. That's why winning is so important. The psychology of winning is something I'm fascinated by. And everybody understands that the more you win, the more attention you get. Well, what's the psychological connection there, right? What is it about our teams that win that make us feel good about it, that makes us want to support it? It's why there's bandwagon fans that come on and fall off when the team loses. There's a psychological connection that somehow we have that when our team wins, it gives us pride. It says something we want the world to know about what we support. It has to do with our personal brand, right? And so winning is about pride, and pride means support, and support means dollars. So make those connections. Student athletes now market themselves as individuals, right, through the NIL personally. And also through the school apparatus. There are many professionals that work in schools now that sort of help them navigate through this new marketplace of NIL now. And there are other professionals, agents and agencies that they can sign up with to help them keep their personal brands up, keep their personal income up. The power of the platform that they have as a student athlete, right? The popularity. Why do we love student athletes? Why are they our heroes? Why do people look up to them? I admire student athletes, but I learned a long time ago I wasn't going to let 18, 19, and 20-year-olds dictate my happiness, whether they win or lose a game. I want my Sooners to win, but if they don't, I'm okay with it, right? They're just young people doing the best they can, and it doesn't, I don't attach myself, my identity to it. So maybe that doesn't make me a very good fan, but, it's a powerful thing. And so there's a platform for that, is what I'm getting at. The spotlight is on these athletes for whatever that psychological reason is. And again, the more support, the more they're liked, the more they're followed, the more income potential, earning income potential they have, the more popular it is for their school. And there's a halo effect and affiliation effect, right? The better athletes you get, the more you win, the more money comes in. And again, that's all competition and recruiting. And of course, in terms of communication, social media rules the day, right? Traditional forms of their email, phone calls, but social media is where the student athletes live. It's where coaches live. It's where fans live. That's how information is shared. That's how we communicate with one another in this space, and we market. Obviously, we know the power of digital marketing, the power of digital media to reach specific target audiences, and to have calls to action. However, around that, as I said, with compliance officers, there's still rules and regulations around communication with schools. They've got to comply with. You still can't cheat. Ideally, there are police watchmen out there with the women on the NCAA, making sure that everybody's playing by the rules. And if schools are ethical, which hope most of them are, they play by those rules because it's the right thing to do. I also think it's the best business thing to do. And as I said, audience size, target audience size directly relates to revenue generation from, again, a school that needs fans in the stands to a television network that needs viewers on the air so they can sell more advertising for more dollars, right? So again, that competition for support, that competition for eyes and ears, and ideally that brings along hearts and minds and loyalty and long-term financial windfall from the investment that we give, our emotions and our time and our energy, and that what we invest into our favorite teams, our favorite schools, our favorite athletes. Lots of career opportunities. I'm sure there's people in this class that would like to be coaches and athletic directors. I think the most important thing that coaches and athletic directors need to know, at least at the highest levels, and I would argue at any levels, you're almost like a CEO these days. You need to really know how universities generate revenue. You need to know if you can speak intelligently about it, because ultimately that's your job, is to make a program healthy. And coaches are going to say, well, that's not my job, but it is. And everybody on the athletic department that's their job, because they're brand ambassadors all the time. What's a brand ambassador? A marketer. That's all it is. You're representing your school, your team, your company, your organization. You are your own brand. You market every single day your brand, what you wear, what you say, how you talk, who you affiliate with, what you like and share online. And it's no different. Coaches, we're all in sales to some degree. We all market, and you're a marketer first. A coach is nothing but a marketer first, especially those on the recruiting trail. All you're doing is representing at school. You're marketing at school. You're trying to get a kid to come in, and you have to understand all the dots that are connected and why that's important, because it generates revenue. And ultimately, that's more money for you, more money for your assistant coaches, more money for a healthy program that ideally, if it's put in the right place, allows you to continue to be successful. And ultimately does what? What's the whole goal of it all? To improve people's lives, right? Again, I always talk about the purpose. What's the purpose? Yeah, you generate revenue, but ideally it's something healthy. So ideally you can do something good in the world, for a student athlete, for a fan base, for your family. Assistant athletic directors, I'll go through these pretty quick. You can work for the NCAA, different offices, conference offices. There's, again, what I'd mentioned before, current issue is an arms race. Go back to the 89-91 foundation report. But again, today, that arms race really is around facilities and the competition for facilities. Student athletes expect, and university athletic departments expect, to have the finest of facilities. It's a direct recruiting tool. I don't know what that says about athletes and their egos, but I like nice things too. And understanding that if you can provide that kind of working environment, that kind of an atmosphere Ideally, that you can recruit a higher level, higher caliber of athlete, and again, it can then start connecting the dots from there again. All right, it's always for a reason. But these things are going. I don't know how many different stadiums and stadium upgrades and fundraising programs are out there to generate millions of dollars to do nothing but upgrade facilities. Now it happens in academia too, right? We need a new library, we need a new museum, we need a new wing of a science department. Those are all important too, but the dollars are only so much out there. And in college athletics, we know that okay, if we have this nice facility, well, next thing to do, we're going to build this nice facility, and the next school's going to do another one, and here we go, and it just goes on and on and on. Where does it end? Don't know. At some point, what is the margin of difference between, let's say, the University of Michigan and the University of Oklahoma or the University of Notre Dame in terms of facilities? As long as they're on level and on a level par, a student athlete's going to make a decision to go to that school for a different reason, right? But you still have to have that. You still have to check that box. And so, therefore, just millions of dollars are going into these arms races. A lot of that dollar comes again from these high dollar television broadcast rights deals. That's where the majority of this money comes from. So institutions that don't belong to a conference with strong revenue sharing model need to be cautious. Again, there are some schools and some conferences that are the haves and have-nots, and some schools generate more revenue than others. Right? SEC, Vanderbilt's in that conference with Alabama and Auburn and all the biggies, right? But they still get an equal share. But again, there's much, much more of a division between the haves and have-nots. I just want to make sure that we understand that even in the FBS and the Power Five, there are the schools within each conference where there are haves and have-nots. And so there's this separation that's happened between major institutions and brands and traditional brands that are remaining powerful, and there's starting to be a bigger gap. Again, I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if that makes my viewing experience any better, and I would argue that it doesn't. You can ask yourself that. And again, here we go on pay for play, which has been a question again all the way back in the 20s, as we saw in our previous slide. Ed O'Bannon tried to do something about it in 2009, and then over the evolution of this, rightly so, NIL was put into place in 2021, which gives people, particularly student athletes, the right, as we all do, to generate income off our own name, image, and likeness. We own our name, image, and likeness, and we should have control on whether we get to monetize it or not, or relinquish that control if we choose to. In the past, universities could market athletes, generate all the revenue, and money wouldn't go to the student. Yes, they were getting education. Yes, they're getting a scholarship. They're taken care of. That's still part of the deal. But that doesn't mean that you can use my face, my image, my name, my likeness to generate revenue for yourself if I don't get a piece of that. And so it's a good thing. It's just caused a lot of chaos. It's caused a lot of confusion about how it works. Each state has its own laws. So depending on where a student athlete wants to go, not only do they have to figure out, okay, well, what school am I going to and what's their NIL support program, but what's the state look like? What do I need to know about that to be, again, compliant with state law? So every year it will continue to grapple with it. A lot of coaches don't like it. It's really upset the apple cart. I think that's why Nick Saban retired. I think he's even said as much. So it's just a good thing, but we're still trying to figure out what to do with it. Okay. Most college athletic departments don't generate a profit. That's what this last slide is saying. I know it's an old, outdated slide, but again, most of them aren't sustainable on their own. That's the key. Of course, there are many people that take advantage of students in the university. This was a terrible one with the Michigan State gymnastics coach. It's just something that, again, laws, rules, and regulations are trying to get a grapple on. But when you put people in powerful positions with young people, a lot of them immature, a lot of them uneducated, a lot of them away from home for the first time, unfortunately, again, some bad actors can get through there. You can look at the Jerry Sandusky case of a few years back at Penn State University. I don't necessarily invite you to do that because it's an awful case. But the point the authors are making here is that it is an issue. It's a societal issue. It can creep into college athletics because, again, there's young people there and there's power bases, people that you should trust. So it's a current issue. Obviously, another issue is making sure there's more inclusion and equality across the board for minorities and people of color to be representative not only on the playing field, but in positions of coaching and management. And this is what this slide speaks to. So in summary, I just want to say again, marketing is part of this recruiting competition for dollars through the support of fans to get take action to again buy something, to support a school in some way, send a student there, buy season tickets, buy licensed merchandise, watch the team on television, which helps ratings, which helps the networks that pay billions of dollars to show these games on television. And so everybody's out there competing for us to support them. And that's what marketing is. And that's what these universities do. You can almost even look at as a college athletic department, nothing but a gigantic marketing department. And within that, people everywhere is doing marketing and sales, and they're directly related. And those are the big takeaways. All right. So with that said, I'll stop sharing this, but what I'll do is, let's see here, stop the share. So I'll go back to this. For those using the 5213, I changed the, go make sure you look at your syllabus and make sure you look at your course schedule. And I added the March Madness assignment. Those of you in the 3613, nothing has changed. I will be putting up quiz number 1, which covers the first 2 chapters and lectures, and more rules, more guidelines on what that looks like here when I post it in just a little bit, but it'll be before the end of the week. And the idea is to be online. It's a multiple choice true false quiz. It'll be over the material that we've covered in these first 2 lectures. And we'll have 4 of those. And so, again, I'll send a notice to you guys when it's posted and what the rules are around taking it, but be looking for that before the end of the week. And then next week, we'll continue moving on. So make sure you start working on your case studies. And then those of you in 5213 need to look at the March Madness assignment that was posted in Blackboard. So with that, I'll go tend to this animal. He's clearly needing some attention. Again, thank you for your patience with him being in here. I'm only here with him today because his other families out of town. So with that said, we'll see you next time.